Imagine waking up 40,000 years ago. No house, no shoes, no blanket, no jacket. Just you, standing in the middle of a freezing landscape. The wind slices across your skin. Your feet sink into cold mud. Every breath burns your lungs. You look around, and everyone else is wearing animal skins. But here's the strange part. Humans weren't always like this. For millions of years, our ancestors walked across Africa, completely naked. So what changed? Why did the only animal with almost no body hair suddenly decide to cover itself? And why might the invention of clothing be one of the biggest reasons you're alive today? Today, getting dressed is the first thing most of us do every morning. But clothing feels so normal that we rarely ask where it actually began. Was there one genius caveman who invented the first shirt? Probably not. In fact, for almost the entire history of humanity, nobody wore anything. Not because they couldn't make clothes, but because they didn't need them. The first humans evolved near the equator, where sunlight was plentiful and winters were mild. The environment itself protected them. Instead of wearing clothes, they evolved something even stranger. They lost them. Their fur. Think about almost every mammal you've ever seen. Bears, wolves, chimpanzees, even tiny mice. They all have fur. Humans don't. That's incredibly unusual. Scientists believe this happened nearly 2 million years ago as our ancestors began walking long distances across hot African grasslands. Their biggest enemy wasn't the cold, it was overheating. Unlike most animals, humans became incredible endurance runners. We couldn't outrun a cheetah, but we could keep moving, hour after hour, until faster animals collapsed from exhaustion. This hunting strategy is called persistence hunting, and it changed everything. Here's something amazing. Humans don't cool down like dogs. Dogs pant. Humans sweat. Millions of tiny sweat glands cover our bodies. When sweat evaporates, it carries heat away. It's like having a built-in air conditioner. But there's a problem. Sweat only works well if thick fur isn't trapping the heat. So over thousands of generations, natural selection favored humans with less and less body hair. We traded fur for sweat. It made us some of the best long-distance travelers the planet has ever seen. But evolution had just created a brand new problem. For hundreds of thousands of years, life was good. Africa stayed warm. The weather was predictable. Clothing simply wasn't necessary. But humans are curious. Eventually, small groups began exploring farther and farther from home. North, into mountains, across deserts, toward forests, into lands where winter wasn't just uncomfortable, it was deadly. Temperatures dropped below freezing. Snow covered the ground. Food became scarce. The same bare skin that once kept humans cool now became a serious weakness. Nature had forced humanity into a difficult choice: adapt or disappear. But here's where the story gets even more fascinating. The first clothes were probably never meant to make people look good. They weren't fashion. They weren't status symbols. They weren't even comfortable. They were survival. And the surprising thing is, the very first outfit may have been nothing more than the skin of an animal that had been eaten only hours earlier. But turning a dead animal into something you could actually wear was far more difficult than you might imagine, because fresh animal skin doesn't stay soft for long. In fact, within days, it becomes stiff, rotten, and completely useless. So how did ancient humans solve that problem? Without factories, without chemicals, or even metal tools? That's where the real story begins. Imagine you've just hunted a deer. Your family has food for several days. But once the meat is gone, something valuable remains. Its skin. At first glance, it seems perfect. It's thick, it's warm, it's covered in fur. So why not wrap it around yourself? Well, because fresh animal skin isn't clothing. It's a corpse. Within hours, bacteria begin breaking it down. The skin becomes wet, slimy. It starts to smell. Then it hardens, like wood. If you simply draped it over your shoulders, it wouldn't keep you warm for long. It would become heavy, crack apart, and eventually rot. Ancient humans faced a challenge no other animal had ever solved. How do you turn something dead into something that protects life?
There was no instruction manual, no chemistry book, no tailor. Everything had to be discovered through trial and error. Imagine someone leaving an animal hide in the sun. A week later, it's ruined. Another person leaves one near the fire. It shrinks. Someone else washes it in a river. Still useless. Thousands of failed experiments spread across countless generations. But slowly, people noticed patterns. Certain plants changed the skin. Smoke changed the skin. Animal brains changed the skin. Even fat helped preserve it. Without realizing it, ancient humans were inventing one of history's oldest chemical technologies: leather tanning.
Here's one of the strangest facts in archaeology. Many traditional cultures used animal brains to soften animal hides. It sounds disgusting, but there's science behind it. Brains contain natural oils called lecithins. These oils coat the fibers inside the skin, keeping them flexible instead of brittle. In fact, there's an old saying among leatherworkers: every animal has enough brains to tan its own hide. Whether completely true or not, the idea captures something remarkable. Ancient people didn't waste anything. The meat became food. The bones became tools. The tendons became thread. The skin became clothing. Even the brain helped preserve the hide. An entire animal could support a family's survival. Nothing was thrown away. Even after softening a hide, there was another problem: rain. Moisture could destroy all that hard work. Then, ancient humans discovered something unexpected: smoke. Hides hanging above smoky fires became more durable. The smoke deposited natural chemicals into the leather, helping slow decay. It also discouraged insects, reduced bacteria, and gave the leather flexibility. A campfire, meant for cooking dinner, accidentally became one of humanity's earliest manufacturing tools. Sometimes, the greatest inventions happen by accident. Even with soft leather, there was another problem. Imagine wrapping a blanket around yourself without tying it. The first strong wind, and it falls off. Running? Impossible. Climbing? Forget it. Ancient humans needed something else. They needed a way to join pieces together. Not glue, not zippers, not buttons. Something much simpler. A needle. But not the kind sitting in your sewing kit today. The very first needles were carved from bone. A tiny piece of sharpened bone. May not seem important, but it allowed humans to create fitted clothing. Clothing that stayed on while hunting, while climbing, while carrying babies, while surviving brutal winters. That single invention opened the door to places humans had never been before. And in the next chapter, we'll follow ancient people as they walked into the Ice Age, armed with nothing but animal skins, bone needles, and the determination to survive. Imagine waking up one morning and your world is disappearing. The forests you hunted in are shrinking. The rivers are freezing. The animals you've always relied on are moving south. This wasn't happening over a few days or even a few years. Over thousands of years, the Earth itself was changing. Massive ice sheets slowly spread across huge parts of Europe, Asia, and North America. Some glaciers were over 3 kilometers thick. Sea levels dropped. Entire landscapes transformed. This was the Ice Age, and humans had a choice: stay behind or follow the food into the cold. The people leaving Africa had never seen snow. Imagine experiencing it for the very first time. Tiny white flakes drift from the sky. At first, it looks beautiful. Then, the wind picks up. Your fingers go numb. Your feet lose all feeling. Every breath feels like breathing tiny knives. Without protection, the human body loses heat incredibly fast. Once your core temperature drops too low, your muscles stop working properly. Your thinking becomes confused. Soon, even staying awake becomes a struggle. The cold doesn't need claws or sharp teeth. It simply waits. But while humans struggled, other animals seemed perfectly comfortable. Look at a muskox, or an Arctic fox, or a reindeer. They didn't build houses. They didn't light fires every few minutes. They carried their shelter with them. Their fur trapped tiny pockets of air, and air is one of the best natural insulators. Ancient humans noticed something important. If fur could keep an animal alive, maybe it could keep a human alive too. Instead of fighting nature, they borrowed its greatest invention:
Early clothing didn't just stop people from freezing, it changed how they lived. Hunters could stay outside longer, families could travel farther, children were more likely to survive harsh winters. Even carrying babies became easier. Imagine trying to hold an infant while crossing icy ground. Now imagine wrapping that child in soft animal fur. Suddenly, the journey becomes possible. Clothing wasn't just protecting individuals, it was protecting generations. Every child who survived winter carried humanity one step further into the future.
By now, animal hides had become much more than blankets. People began shaping them, cutting them, fitting them to the human body. Archaeologists have discovered tiny bone needles dating back tens of thousands of years. Some even had carefully drilled eyes, almost identical to modern sewing needles. Think about what that means. Someone sat beside a fire, patiently punching a tiny hole through bone. Not because it was art, but because survival demanded precision. A loose hide lets cold air inside. A stitched jacket traps warmth. Sometimes, the smallest invention creates the biggest advantage. With better clothing, humans accomplished something extraordinary. They entered places no tropical primate should have survived: frozen valleys, snow-covered forests, windy mountain passes. Eventually, people spread across Europe, into northern Asia, and, much later, across the icy land bridge into the Americas. Without clothing, those journeys may never have happened. But warmth wasn't the only thing clothes would eventually provide. Because before long, people began wearing something that wasn't needed for survival at all. And that changed human society forever.
For thousands of years, clothing had one simple purpose: stay alive, keep warm, protect your skin. But eventually, humans became better at surviving. They built stronger shelters, they mastered fire, they hunted more efficiently. And something fascinating happened. For the first time, people could afford to think about something beyond survival. What they wore started to mean something. A piece of clothing no longer just said, "I don't want to freeze." It began to say, "This is who I am."
Imagine living in a world with no passports, no flags, no written language. You meet another group of humans. Are they friendly or dangerous? You have only seconds to decide. Clothing became one of the quickest ways to recognize someone. Different groups preferred different animal skins. Some decorated their clothes with feathers, others used shells, animal teeth, or colorful stones. Without saying a single word, your clothing could reveal where you came from. It was one of humanity's earliest forms of communication.
Today, fashion changes every season, but tens of thousands of years ago, fashion wasn't about trends, it was about skill. Imagine spending weeks sewing together dozens of animal hides, every stitch made by hand, every hole punched through leather with a bone needle, every thread twisted from animal sinew. Creating one outfit could take hundreds of hours. When someone wore beautifully crafted clothing, everyone could immediately see the effort behind it. It wasn't just practical, it demonstrated patience, experience, and craftsmanship. Long before designer brands, skill itself was the luxury.
Then humans added something unexpected: decoration. Archaeologists have discovered necklaces made from shells, animal teeth, mammoth ivory, and tiny beads carved from bone. Some are over 100,000 years old. What's remarkable is that many of these objects had no survival purpose. They didn't make people warmer, they didn't help with hunting. So why spend so much time making them? Because humans aren't driven by survival alone. We're driven by meaning. A necklace might honor a loved one, celebrate a successful hunt, mark adulthood, or simply express individuality. The moment humans decorated their clothing, they began telling stories without words. As communities grew larger, trust became more important. Clothing helped strengthen that trust. Imagine every member of your group wearing similar decorations, the same colors, the same symbols, the same style. You instantly knew who belonged. That sense of belonging encouraged people to work together, to share food, to protect children, to defend one another. Modern sports teams wear matching uniforms. Soldiers wear matching uniforms. Even today, clothing quietly reminds us we're on the same side. That idea may have begun tens of thousands of years ago.
But humanity wasn't finished improving clothing. Animal skins worked well until people began settling down, building villages, growing crops, living together all year round. Suddenly, heavy fur wasn't always practical. People needed something lighter, something easier to make, something they didn't have to hunt for. And that discovery would completely transform the future of clothing. It started with a simple plant growing beside a river.
For hundreds of thousands of years, life followed a familiar rhythm. Find food, follow the animals, move when the seasons changed. Home was wherever your tribe stopped for the night. But around 12,000 years ago, everything began to change. Instead of chasing food, humans started growing it. Instead of wandering endlessly, they built villages. For the first time, families stayed in one place for years, and suddenly, their clothing had to change too. A heavy fur coat that was perfect in a frozen forest was miserable to wear while harvesting crops beneath the summer sun. People needed something lighter, cooler, and easier to produce. They were about to discover a completely different kind of clothing.
Imagine picking up a wild plant. At first, it doesn't look useful, but inside its stem are long, incredibly strong fibers. Ancient people discovered that if these fibers were separated, twisted together, and woven carefully, they could create cloth. Different parts of the world discovered different plants. Some learned to use flax, others used hemp. Later, cotton would transform entire civilizations. For the first time, people didn't need to hunt an animal just to make clothing. Nature offered another solution, one growing silently from the ground.
But thread alone wasn't enough. Someone had to figure out how to turn thousands of tiny strands into a single piece of fabric. The answer was weaving. Imagine stretching dozens of threads side by side, then carefully passing another thread over, then under, again and again. It sounds simple, but that repeating pattern created something extraordinary. A strong, flexible, comfortable fabric. One of humanity's oldest machines. The loom was born. It didn't have gears or electricity, yet it changed the world forever. Think about what this meant. Making a fur coat often required tracking an animal, hunting it, skinning it, cleaning the hide, softening it, smoking it, cutting it, and sewing every piece together. That could take weeks, sometimes even longer. Woven cloth changed the equation. Once people mastered spinning and weaving, they could create large pieces of fabric without relying on successful hunts. That meant more clothing, more trade, and more time to focus on farming, building, and inventing. Sometimes, a single invention doesn't just solve one problem. It unlocks dozens of others. As villages grew into towns and towns became cities, clothing gained an entirely new purpose. It became valuable, very valuable. Fine cloth could be traded across enormous distances. Some fabrics became so rare, only the wealthiest people could own them. Imagine walking into a marketplace thousands of years ago. One person wears rough linen, another wears brightly colored cloth. Without anyone speaking, you already know something about their lives. Clothing had become a symbol, not just of survival, but of status. The richer societies became, the more clothing reflected social class. By now, humans had achieved something incredible. They had gone from wrapping fresh animal hides around their shoulders to weaving entire outfits from plants. But clothing still had one final transformation ahead. It would become art, religion, power, culture. Every civilization, from Egypt to China to the Americas, would use clothing to tell the world who they were. And that story is where our journey comes to an unforgettable end. Take a look at what you're wearing right now. A t-shirt, a hoodie, a pair of jeans, maybe a jacket. To you, they're just clothes, something you put on without thinking. But every single piece exists because of a journey that began tens of thousands of years ago. Your clothes are the result of millions of tiny discoveries made by people whose names we'll never know. Someone learned how to scrape a hide. Someone discovered smoke-preserved leather. Someone carved the first bone needle. Someone twisted the first plant fibers into thread. Each generation passed its knowledge to the next, and little by little, humanity changed forever. Think about where humans live today. Frozen Alaska, the scorching Sahara, the Himalayas, rainforests, tiny islands in the Pacific, bustling cities, remote mountain villages. No other primate has spread across the planet like we have. Why? Because humans don't adapt only with their bodies. We adapt with our minds. When nature gave polar bears thick fur, humans invented coats. When birds built nests, humans built houses. When winter became deadly, humans designed better clothing. Instead of waiting for evolution, we created our own solutions. That may be humanity's greatest superpower.
As civilizations grew, clothing became something even more remarkable. It became culture. In the frozen Arctic, people created parkas from seal and caribou skins. In hot deserts, loose robes reflected sunlight and allowed air to circulate. In tropical forests, lightweight plant fibers helped people stay cool. There was never one perfect outfit. Every environment inspired a different solution. Every culture added its own creativity. Even today, you can often recognize where someone comes from simply by the traditional clothes they wear. Clothing became a language, one spoken without words.
But here's something surprising. The most important invention wasn't the clothing itself. It was the ability to share knowledge. Imagine if every generation had to rediscover everything from scratch. One family learns to make leather, then dies, and the secret disappears forever. Human civilization would never have advanced. Instead, parents taught children. Children taught their own families. Knowledge spread from one tribe to another. A better needle, a stronger thread, a smarter weaving technique. Small improvements, repeated over thousands of years, changed the entire world. Clothing is proof that human progress is built one idea at a time.
Now imagine another version of history. Humans never learned to make clothing. What would happen? We would probably have remained close to warm climates. The Ice Age would have blocked our expansion north. Much of Europe, northern Asia, and eventually the Americas might never have been settled by our ancestors in the same way. Entire civilizations could have developed differently. Or perhaps not at all. One simple invention made possible thousands of others. Cities, trade, exploration, empires, even the clothes you're wearing today can trace their story back to those first animal hides wrapped around ancient shoulders. Sometimes, history doesn't change because of one great king or one famous battle. Sometimes, it changes because someone solved a simple, everyday problem.
The next time you zip up a jacket, tie your shoes, or pull on your favorite hoodie, remember this. You're not just wearing fabric. You're wearing the legacy of thousands of generations who refused to let nature decide their fate. From rough animal skins to woven cloth to the clothes hanging in your wardrobe today, every stitch tells a story of curiosity, innovation, and survival. Because clothing was never just about staying warm. It was one of the first signs that humans could reshape the world instead of simply living in it. If you enjoyed traveling back through history with me, make sure to subscribe, because in the next video, we'll uncover another forgotten chapter of ancient human life. Until then, thanks for watching.